Part 30. Neural Phi interface. The brain as a phase processor. Derivation. Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase. One continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. You enter a new kind of lab. The air is still, filtered. The light is dim. You are in the Neural Dynamics Observatory. But we are not here to propose a hypothesis. We are here to derive a necessary conclusion. The displays show the familiar oscillations: alpha, beta, theta, gamma rhythms flowing across cortical maps. But we now understand, these are not merely brain waves. They are direct expressions of phi. The electrical potentials measured by EEG, the magnetic fields captured by MEG, the spiking patterns of neurons, these are all shadows cast by the underlying phi field as it operates within the wet, living, constrained geometry of the brain. The brain is not like a phi processor. It is a phi processor, because everything that physically exists is a pattern in phi. The question is not if, but how. How does the particular phi dynamics of neural tissue give rise to the specific phenomena of perception, memory, and thought? Your new skill is that of the Neural Phi deriver. You are learning to apply the absolute, deductive logic of holophase to neuroscience. Starting from the first principle, one field, phi, and deriving what neural activity must be, then checking this deduction against measurement. Scene: the Neural Dynamics Observatory. A volunteer rests comfortably, an EEG net on their scalp. They watch images. But now, you don't see squiggles. You see a live field reconstruction. The software takes the voltage differences from the scalp and solves the inverse problem to estimate the underlying cortical field dynamics. You see phase gradients forming as a phase is perceived, a topological defect, a phase vortex, stabilizing over the fusiform phase area. You see a traveling wave of phase reset sweep from visual to frontal cortex as recognition occurs. This is the motion echo of understanding. You see the time echo in the precise 40 Hz gamma rhythm that binds features. And you see the space echo in the stable pattern of phase relationships that defines the percept's signature. This is not a hypothesis that this might be phi processing. This is the mathematical consequence of recognizing that the brain's electromagnetic activity is a phi field. The only question is whether we have the resolution and the right derivative operators to read its grammar. The puzzle is solved in principle. The work is in translation and validation. Our work is one of deductive mapping. Given the absolute claim that all physical reality is the holophase field phi and its constrained derivatives, we must derive the expected observable signatures of neural activity as a particular instance of phi dynamics, and then verify that these derived signatures match empirical neural data with significantly greater precision and predictive power than conventional non-phi models. We are moving from engineering external phi fields to decoding the internal phi field that is cognition itself. The language role, the deductive interpretation skill. This part teaches a first principles derivation skill. It is the skill of starting from the ontological foundation of holophase and deductively working forward to derive the necessary formal characteristics of neural information processing, its phase-coded nature, its wave-like propagation, its topological computation, and then using these derived characteristics as a superior framework for designing experiments and interpreting data. Our core question about phi is not if, but since neural activity is a manifestation of the phi field, what specific mathematically necessary properties in terms of phase coherence, derivative constraints, and topological invariance must it exhibit? And how do we construct the measurement operators to confirm these properties in neural data? We are moving from asking questions in biology to making formal predictions from physics. The anchor image, the master clockmaker's blueprint. We will use the anchor image of a master clockmaker who has discovered the fundamental principle of the spring. Not just a spring, but the spring, the single universal principle of elastic potential. From this single principle, they can derive the necessary workings of all timekeeping devices. Pendulums, balance wheels, hairsprings. They don't look at a pocket watch and hypothesize it might use spring mechanics. They know it must, because all periodic motion in material systems springs from this principle. Their task is to take apart any given clock and show how its specific gears and levers are particular instantiations of spring dynamics. They predict that if you measure the oscillation of the balance wheel, it will obey the derived equation for a Dent harmonic oscillator. If it doesn't, either the measurement is wrong or the clock is broken. Our work is identical. Phi is the universal spring. The brain is a particular, astoundingly complex clock. We are deriving its necessary dynamics from first principles and then reading its time. The coherent selection principle in neural derivation. In this deductive approach, coherence is agreement between derivation and data. Constructive resonance, alignment, means the properties we derive from phi first principles, for example, that information will be encoded in phase relationships, that signals will propagate as traveling waves with specific dispersion relations, that learning will involve the creation of stable topological defects in the field, are empirically observed in neural data. The phi model not only fits, but predicts finer details that other models miss. Destructive resonance, dissonance, means the empirically observed neural dynamics consistently violate the constraints derived from phi principles. For example, if neural signals are found to be fundamentally scalar and non-oscillatory, with no phase relationships that carry information, this would contradict the derived wave-like nature of phi dynamics in an excitable medium. The neural deriver's mantra is about necessary truth. If it's phi, it must show these features. If it doesn't show these features, our measurement or our local model is incomplete because the foundation is absolute. Core mechanisms, deriving neural dynamics from phi. We don't fit models to data, we derive what the data must be. 1. The neural field as a constrained phi manifold. We start with the brain as a physical medium. Its electromagnetic activity is a phi field, or a direct derivative thereof. But it's a phi field under extreme biological constraints. The geometry. The folded cortex, the white matter tracts. This is the spatial boundary condition, the K-space structure that shapes the possible standing waves and propagation paths. The excitability. Neurons are threshold elements. This imposes a non-linear constraint on the phi field. Small changes do nothing. Past the threshold, they cause a rapid, large-scale phase reset, an action potential. This translates into soliton-like solutions, self-reinforcing waves of phase change that propagate along axons. Derivation of oscillations. From the interaction of excitatory and inhibitory neuronal populations, EI balance, phi dynamics necessarily produce stable limit cycles, ongoing oscillations. The frequencies, omega, of these oscillations are derived from the time constants of neural membranes and synaptic delays. Alpha, 10 Hz, isn't arbitrary. It's a natural resonance of the thalamocortical loop under phi. Phase coding is a necessary consequence of wave nature. If the neural signal is a wave-like phi perturbation, then the primary degree of freedom is phase, not amplitude. Consider a pure tone. Its information, frequency, is in the rate of phase change. In a complex wave, the relationship between phases at different points, coherence, carries information about structure. Therefore, we derive that the brain must use phase relationships to encode information. The rate code, firing rate, is a crude, low-bandwidth sampling of the underlying phase field's intensity. The true information is in the relative timing. Traveling waves as derived propagation modes. In a continuous phi field with local coupling via synapses, perturbations naturally propagate as waves. We can derive the expected wave equation for cortical tissue. From this, we predict the existence of traveling waves with specific speeds and directions. Their detection is not a lucky find. It is a confirmation of the derived propagation mode. 4. Topological computation as invariant formation. Learning and memory involve creating stable changes. In phi, stability is achieved through topological invariants, patterns that cannot be smoothly undone, like vortices, phase singularities, or knots. We therefore derive that long-term memory must involve the formation of stable topological defects in the neural phi field. Synaptic weight changes are the material substrate that pins these topological features in place. The memory itself is the topological pattern. The coherence criterion matched to derived phi signatures. Our coherence criterion is now a strict test of the derivation. Neural data must exhibit the specific signatures derived from 5 first principles, information encoded in phase relationships, Mordant power, wave-like propagation obeying derived dispersion relations, and learning correlated with the formation of measurable topological invariants in the field dynamics. If these signatures are absent, either our derivation of how phi manifests in neural tissue is wrong, a serious challenge to the theory's completeness, or our measurements are too coarse to detect them. The dissonance indicator, violation of derived wave mechanics. The primary dissonance indicator is the consistent violation of derived wave mechanical properties. If neural data robustly shows purely scalar non-wave dynamics, information flows as purely digital asynchronous pulses with no oscillatory coordination or phase relationships. Instantaneous action at a distance. Communication between regions appears simultaneous, violating the derived finite propagation speed of phi perturbations in the medium. Absence of topological stability. Memory formation shows no correspondence to the creation of stable large-scale field patterns, like phase coherence or vortices, only to microscopic synaptic changes with no global field signature. Such findings would not just challenge a hypothesis, they would challenge the applicability of the continuous phi field description to neural tissue, suggesting the brain operates on fundamentally different principles than the rest of the physical world. Given the absolute claim, this would be a major falsification point for the entire Holophase framework. The safety rail, deductive certainty versus empirical humility. Our safety rail balances logical necessity with measurement limitations. 1. The derivation is absolute, the manifestation is noisy. We derive what neural activity must be in principle, but the actual measured brain is a noisy, messy biological system. Our safety rail is to never confuse the clean derivation with the messy data. We expect the derived signatures to be visible on average or after appropriate filtering, not in every raw trace. We account for noise and biological variability as obscuring factors, not as disproof. 2. No mind reading from first principles. Even with a perfect phi model of brain activity, translating field patterns into specific subjective thoughts is a semantic decoding problem of immense complexity. The safety rail is clear. The phi framework gives us the syntax of neural dynamics, not the semantics of personal experience. We can predict that a specific phase pattern will occur when you see a face, but deducing the subjective feel of recognition or familiarity from the pattern alone remains a profound additional step. We claim to derive the mechanics, not the meaning. The safety rail rule: we use the absolute derivation to guide measurement and model building, but we let the messy empirical data have the final say on whether our specific instantiated models are correct. The foundation is non-negotiable. Our local maps of its terrain are always provisional. A measurement scene, validating the derived phase code. Let's enact a measurement scene that tests a derived necessity. Scene: testing the derived prediction that working memory maintenance is encoded in the stable phase of a frontal theta oscillation, not just its power. Goal: confirm that phase, as a primary phi degree of freedom, carries the essential information. The derivation: the act of holding information online requires a stable recurrent dynamic. In an oscillatory phi system, the only way to maintain a discrete state across cycles is to lock the phase of the oscillation to a specific value relative to a process, like the probe. Power, amplitude, can vary without losing the phase-locked state. Therefore, memory accuracy must correlate more strongly with phase stability than with power. The protocol: same as before, e.g. during a working memory task. Extract theta phase and power during the delay. The pass, derivation confirmed. 1. Phase-based decoding accuracy is significantly higher than power-based decoding. 2. The phase angle for remembered trials is consistent and stable across the delay period, as derived for a maintenance mechanism. 3. The result replicates universally because it reflects a necessary mechanism, not a contingent biological trick. Hezbollah. 4. Pass. The data confirms a specific, non-optional prediction derived from phi principles. This is stronger than a hypothesized correlation. It is a necessary relationship being validated. The fail, derivation challenged. Hezbollah. Fail A, power superior. If power consistently predicts memory better than phase, it suggests the information is in the amplitude modulation of the field, not its phase structure. This contradicts the derivation that the fundamental variable is phase. Fail B, no phase stability. If the phase is random during maintenance, it contradicts the derived requirement for phase locking to maintain a discrete state in an oscillatory system. Theory. Fail. This would force a major revision. Either A, our derivation of how phi manifests in this specific cognitive function is flawed, or B, the brain is not using an oscillatory phi mode for working memory, which would be a surprising exception requiring explanation within the phi framework. The prediction spine. Necessities, not possibilities. The predictions are now stronger. They are not about what we might find, but about what must be the case. 1. Universal phase coding advantage. The decoding advantage of phase features over power rate features will be a universal finding across brain regions and cognitive tasks that involve dynamic oscillatory processing. It is not a sometimes effect. It is a necessary consequence of the wave nature of the signal. 2. Wave propagation parameters. The speed and direction of traveling waves in cortex will obey a dispersion relation derived from the phi-wave equation for neural tissue, incorporating synaptic delays, membrane constants. Measured waves will match this derived relation within biological noise bounds. 3. Topological signatures of learning. The formation of a long-term memory will be accompanied by a measurable change in the topological invariant structure. For example, the emergence of a stable phase vortex or a change in the homology of the activation pattern of the neural phi field in the relevant region. This invariant will be more stable than individual synaptic weights. Falsifiability. When the derivation fails the brain. Our falsifiability threads test the applicability of the absolute claim to the neural domain. After exhaustive, high-quality measurement, neural activity consistently and robustly lacks the key signatures derived from phi dynamics. Specifically, if it shows no evidence of phase coding advantage, no wave-like propagation, and no topological stability in learning, then the Holophase framework, while perhaps valid for fundamental physics, fails as a complete or useful description of neural information processing. The brain would be a stark exception, operating on different principles. This would be a severe limitation of the theory's universality, the incoherence of competing models under phi. Conversely, if the phi derivation is correct, then competing non-phi models of neural function, for example, pure rate codes, digital circuit models, will eventually hit insurmountable contradictions or fail to explain key phenomena that the phi model explains naturally. For example, binding, oscillation-based attention, meta-model integration. Their failure is a shadow validation of the phi approach. Tri-unity in the neural phi field. The derivation makes the tri-unity explicit and necessary. Time echo, omega frequency. The oscillation frequencies are not arbitrary. They are derived eigenvalues of the damped, driven phi field equations for the neural medium. Theta, around 6 Hz, emerges from hippocampal cortical feedback loops. Gamma, around 40 Hz, from local inhibitory excitatory cycles. The spatial patterns of phase coherence are dictated by the underlying structural connectivity, the white matter K-space. The connectome is the boundary condition that shapes the possible standing wave modes of the brain's phi field. The propagation of activity is the motion of phase perturbations, action potentials, local field potentials through this medium, governed by the derived wave equation. Thought is literally the guided motion of phi disturbances along preferred pathways. Lanterns across scales, phi processing as universal. The derivation shows neural processing is a special case of a universal principle. Near scale, cardiac pacemaker. The sinoatrial node's rhythmic firing is a limit cycle oscillator in a phi field of excitable cardiac tissue. Its derivation is simpler, but of the same form. A nonlinear phi dynamics leading to stable periodic motion. The brain is a network of billions of such coupled oscillators. Middle scale, phased array radar. A radar system that steers its beam by controlling the phase differences between many small antennas. This is a technological implementation of the same principle the brain uses, in a more complex way, to steer attention or bind features. controlling phase relationships across a spatial array of sensors, processors. In quantum field theory, particles are excitations of underlying fields. In our phi derivation, a memory engram or a percept is a stable excitation, a soliton or topological defect in the neural phi field. The mathematical analogy is deep, suggesting a unified conceptual framework from quantum phenomena to cognition. The ethics of neural phi derivation, clarity over mystery. The ethics here shifts from humility about ignorance to responsibility about clarity. 1. Demystification as an ethical act. If the phi derivation is correct, it removes the basis for vitalistic or magical explanations of mind. This is ethically double-edged. It can combat pseudoscience, but it must not be used to enable a reductionist arrogance that disrespects the lived reality of experience. Our ethical duty is to present the derivation clearly while steadfastly maintaining that describing the mechanism is not describing the experience. 2. Predictive power for pathology. A correct phi model of brain function gives us a powerful new lens for neurological and psychiatric disorders. Schizophrenia could be viewed as a disintegration of large-scale phase coherence, epilepsy as a pathological hypersynchronization, Alzheimer's as a progressive loss of topological stability in the cognitive field. This derived perspective can ethically guide therapeutic research, as in 10.6.2, toward coherence restoration. 3. Guarding against misuse of certainty. The tone of derivation and necessity could be misused to claim we have solved the brain and thus can manipulate it without restraint. The ethical stance must be, we have derived the physics. The ethics of applying that physics to minds remains as complex and sacred as ever. The safety rails of consent, therapeutic intent, and semantic humility are not weakened by the derivation. They are made more precise. The recognition skill. Seeing the derivation in the pattern. You know you have this skill when you look at any complex dynamic system and immediately ask, what are the fundamental field variables? What are the constraint equations? What wave modes, phase relationships, and topological invariants does this system necessarily support? You see a flock of birds and think, emergent field with alignment rules, a coarse-grained phi dynamics. You see a traffic flow and think, density wave in a field of agents, a nonlinear phi problem with bottlenecks as topological defects. You see a market chart and think, coupled oscillator system showing synchronization and phase transitions. The moment you stop looking for analogies and start looking for the specific derivable field equations that generate the observed dynamics, you are thinking like a neural phi deriver. You are seeing the world as manifestations of phi. The master tree location. This part, 10.6.1, is the necessary foundational step in book 10.6. It is not a tentative hypothesis. It is the application of the absolute core of Holophase to the brain. It depends on the entire preceding structure, the nature of phi, its derivatives, constraints, and coherence principles. It provides the firm, deductive ground upon which the cautious interventions of 10.6.2, biological control, and the sharpened questions of 10.6.3, consciousness, must be built. If this derivation is sound, then the brain is not a mystery to be solved in isolation, but a complex system to be understood as a particular expression of the universal language. Return to the phi. Let us zoom out. The Neural Phi interface is not an interface between the brain and some external phi field. The brain's activity is the phi field, vibrating in a particular, living, structured medium. Neural processing is a name for the dance of this field under the incredibly specific constraints of anatomy, chemistry, and evolution. The firing of a neuron is a localized, rapid phase slip. A thought is a large-scale, coherent pattern of phase relationships. A memory is a topological knot tied in the field's fabric. The single field, phi, manifests as the spike, the rhythm, the traveling wave, the percept. There is no duality. The mind is what the brain's phi field is doing. Our journey inward is not into a separate realm, but into a particularly beautiful and intricate region of the one tapestry. We are learning to read our own thread in the weave. Zenodo and the equations of the handshake. If you want to see the full mathematical derivations and exact equations behind this idea, you can search for Holophase on Zenodo. There you will find the scientific papers that this audio journey is built on. The papers contain the formal derivations, starting from the fundamental phi field action, imposing the constraints of neural tissue, excitability, connectivity, and deriving the resulting nonlinear wave equations, their oscillatory solutions, the conditions for phase coding, and the topological classification of neural activity patterns. They provide the rigorous mathematical proof that, given the Holophase postulate, neural dynamics must take the form we observe and measure. So, picture yourself back in the Neural Dynamics Observatory. The displays no longer show mysterious squiggles. They show the solved equations of a living field. The phase locking, the traveling waves, the emerging topological defects, each is a predicted token of a derived type. You have not found a clue, you have verified a consequence. You have learned to see neural activity not as a biological puzzle, but as a physics problem that has been solved in principle. Your skill is to translate that solution into ever sharper measurements and models. This is part 10.6.1, Neural Phi Interface, the brain as a phase processor, derivation. It is the non-negotiable first step of biological interface, establishing that the mind's machinery is made of the same stuff as the stars. In our next part, we proceed with the responsibility this knowledge entails. If we understand the brain as a phase system, can we, with immense caution, learn to tune it toward health? We enter part 10.6.2, biological control, the healer's caution, where our derived understanding meets the sacred duty to heal, not just to know. Remember, one field, phi, with its infinite echoes. We have followed its echoes from the void to the foundry to the network. Now we find them resonating within the skull, not as a guest, but as the host. We are listening to the universe think. Salam and peace be upon you.